I woke up in the woods to find our entire campsite had been perfectly rearranged while we slept. This was supposed to be our annual escape. Me and my 3 best friends from college, Jake, Mia, and Leo, had this tradition of a weekend in the mountains every spring. That year, money was tight, so we opted for a remote, free spot I'd found on an app, deep in the Colorado backcountry. The isolation was exactly what we wanted, until it wasn't. We arrived in the late afternoon, finding a flat clearing near a dried-up riverbed. It was completely secluded, no other tire tracks or people. Perfect. We pitched our tents in a haphazard circle, cooked dinner over the fire, and turned in early, exhausted from the drive. I'm usually a light sleeper, but that night, I fell into a deep, unnatural slumber. It was the kind of sleep that feels forced upon you. The next morning, I unzipped my tent and my blood ran cold. Our tents were no longer in a circle. They had been repositioned into a perfect square formation, centered around a small, carefully stacked pyramid of rocks that absolutely was not there before. Each tent had been dragged about 20 feet. The weirdest part? Nothing inside was disturbed. My sleeping bag, my phone charger, everything was exactly as I'd left it. It was as if the tents themselves had been picked up and placed. I yelled for the others. One by one, they emerged, each wearing the same look of stunned confusion. None of us remembered a thing. But then Mia mentioned a strange dream about walking through a vast, empty desert while a voice counted her steps. Jake said he'd dreamed of marching in a military unit. The similarity was chilling. The atmosphere between us felt different. We were connected, but by a shared, unspoken dread, like a fifth, invisible presence was there with us. We were sharing a fear we couldn't name. We found drag marks in the dirt, but they stopped short of the final tent positions, as if the tents had been carried the last few feet. Jake, trying to make sense of it, went to inspect the rock pile and accidentally knocked it over. The stones clattered to the ground, and in the silence that followed, we all heard it at once. A low, grinding rumble, like stones sliding against stone, echoed from the trees. We didn't speak a word. We just started packing, moving in a synchronized panic, feeling each other's terror. We were out of there in under 5 minutes. That was years ago. We've all drifted apart since, moving to different cities. We never talk about that trip. I think we're all afraid that giving it words might make it real again. My girlfriend, Chloe, and I needed to reconnect. Our relationship had fallen into a predictable rut, so we planned a secluded weekend in Utah's national forest. We found a small, first-come, first-served campground with sites spaced far apart. As we drove in, we passed one other vehicle, a beat-up red pickup, but saw no one. We chose the most private spot at the very end of the road. That evening, as we sat by the fire, a man stepped out of the shadows. He introduced himself as Ben, said he was camping solo in the red truck. His eye contact was too intense, too unwavering. The conversation was awkward, and his attention was fixed entirely on Chloe. I made an excuse about an early morning, and he finally left, melting back into the dark without a flashlight. I woke up hours later to the sound of muffled voices right outside our tent. I held my breath, listening. The moment I shifted my weight, the voices stopped dead. I shone my flashlight outside but found no one. I wrote it off as other campers and tried to sleep. The next day, I found a note tucked under my wiper blade. It read, "You should leave tonight." I showed Chloe, and we were debating what to do when Ben appeared again, as if on cue. I confronted him, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. He apologized for startling us but then said something that changed everything. He told us this area had a reputation. He'd found abandoned campsites before, gear just left behind. He claimed he'd heard people circling his truck last night and was packing up to leave before sunset. He strongly advised us to do the same. His warning felt like a confession. That was all the convincing we needed. We packed in a frantic rush as the sun dipped below the horizon. As we drove out, I saw Ben's red truck was still there. I slowed down and saw him standing by a completely slashed tire. He asked for a ride, but Chloe gripped my arm, her knuckles white. I refused, promising to call for help once we had service. We drove on, our headlights cutting through the deepening dark. About 100 yards down the road, I saw them. 3 figures, standing perfectly still among the trees, watching us pass. They weren't hiding. They were observing. I hit the brakes instinctively, but Chloe screamed, "Drive! Now!" I slammed the gas. I called 911 from the highway. They sent a car, but we never learned what, if anything, they found. I'm left with a gnawing guilt, wondering if Ben was a victim or something else entirely. After my divorce, I needed to disappear. I'm an experienced outdoorsman, an Eagle Scout, so a solo trip deep into the Montana wilderness didn't scare me. I needed the absolute solitude. I found coordinates on an old forum for a spot so remote it wasn't on any map. The drive-in was brutal, the final stretch an overgrown track that barely qualified as a road. When I finally arrived at the clearing, I wasn't alone. There was an old, mildewed tent, its fabric rotting. I called out, got no answer. The smell from inside was putrid. Fighting the stench, I looked in and found an empty sleeping bag, some cans, and a small journal. I took it. The pages were filled with tally marks, hundreds of them, grouped in 7s. The last page had over 8 months' worth of counts. It was unsettling, but I was more intrigued than frightened. I set up my own camp a good distance away, my rifle always within reach. I was jolted awake in the dead of night by whispers, multiple voices, having a hushed conversation just beyond my tent walls. I froze, my hand closing around my rifle. Then I heard footsteps, circling me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then someone started yanking on my tent zipper. When it didn't give, they started scratching at the fabric like an animal trying to claw its way in. I shouted that I was armed. The scratching stopped. For a second, silence. Then, the sound of several people running off in different directions. I didn't sleep another minute. At first light, I emerged, rifle ready. The old tent was gone. Not just taken down, but gone. The ground where it stood was pristine, no impression, no stakes. But all around my site were bare footprints in the dirt, different sizes. They led to a nearby pine tree. Freshly carved into its bark were tally marks, 7 groups of 7, and the beginning of an 8th. Just like the journal. And then I saw it. Tied to a low branch with fishing line was a dead rabbit, its body mutilated and posed. It wasn't a natural death. It was a message, a threat. I've seen a lot in the woods, but this was a new level of sickening. I packed my gear in a trembling rush, my eyes constantly scanning the tree line. The drive out was the longest of my life. I never reported it. What would I say? The tallies were counting something, and I have a terrible feeling I know what or who the next mark was meant to be. If these stories got under your skin, show the channel some support. Give this video a like and subscribe to Winds of Thought for more tales from the shadows.